At our table this morning, Republican Rich McCormick from Georgia. Thank you very much for being here. 6th District, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee. How did you vote on moving forward officially with this impeachment inquiry into President Biden?
I voted for it. It was actually a strong showing to see it very resolutely voted for and passed.
Why?
I think there's always surprises in the Republican Party about who's going to hold out. In this case, I didn't see it. I think there's enough evidence right now of very suspicious behavior. It's way beyond coincidental that it needs to be exposed. It needs to be looked into. Certainly, if it was in my account, if it was my bank account, if it was my family, and you had the same exact scenario, I'd be looked in for sure. So why not?
They have been investigating for a year. Mm-hmm. There are Republicans like Chuck Grassley who say, I haven't seen any evidence of wrongdoing by the president after a year of investigating.
Well, I don't think that's accurate at all. I mean, if you look at the number of accounts that are associated with his family, which are unexplained, when you talk about loan repayments, but you can't see where the loan was made, which is unexplained, when you talk about every time an account comes from 5 different countries and 20 different accounts and then it's transferred over to the big guy, that's unexplained. You know how much scrutiny we are in Congress for everything that goes into my bank account? Every single dollar, every single investment that goes into my account is looked at with a fine-tuned code every single year. Why wouldn't the president, who has a son who was working for a foreign agency that had no qualifications for that, who received millions of dollars, and 5 other family members who received millions of dollars in 20 different bank accounts that seem to, every time they get a deposit, make a deposit into the president's account, why wouldn't that be up for grabs? Why wouldn't that be something we'd look into, just like you would if my account was having the same exact disparities? Everybody would be looking at it, and everybody would be talking about it. So this is just what we should do.
When you run for president, aren't you under that same scrutiny?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all under the same laws.
So why wasn't it found then? If there was wrongdoing, why wasn't it found when he ran for president?
I have no idea. I mean, this is the inquiry process is what started this. When we started looking into it. Now, if he did not disclose this, that's exactly what we're looking at. Look, I can lie on my forms. We've seen members of Congress lie on forms in the past and get in trouble for that. That's exactly what's going on now as this stuff has been exposed that was not disclosed. When he said, I didn't know anything about it, and then we showed he did, he's like, oh, my bad. I knew about it, but I never attended any meetings. And then when we showed he attended meetings, he's like, well, okay, I attended meetings, but so he's been caught in several lies already. It's not like we haven't found anything. We found several things that disqualified him from the truth already, and his bank account is also showing very concerning behavior.
Moving on to the defense authorization bill, it passed the Senate yesterday, 87-13. It includes reauthorizing Section 702 of FISA. It also has money for Ukraine and Israel. That's separate from this debate over the supplemental, that $111 billion. But how will you vote today? It's expected to come to the floor.
So I'm going to vote for it. I know it's going to be controversial. I know I'm going to take a lot of grief from it at home. There are some real concerns with having FISA expire. I don't like the way it is right now. I think it's been abused. It has been honed in. We had a brief by our Intel chair, Mr. Turner, and he talked about how it's already been pared down so that the egregious behavior of the FBI is already been addressed, but it needs to be addressed in very specific ways, and we're going to do that as we pass another bill on that. But to have it expire during a time where we obviously have security concerns, to have the military not funded during Christmas period, to have so many things going around the world that have to be addressed, I think it's the right thing to do. Elections have consequences. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the White House. If we let this expire, we're going to be the bad guys. And I think this is something that has to get done. It's not what I want. It's not everything I want. Matter of fact, it doesn't have the pay raises for the junior enlisted that I think we need, who are literally impoverished. We need to have an adjustment for cost of living that we haven't had for decades, which they've fallen further and further behind inflation. We can show that. We can show how tons of military people are on food stamps. It doesn't have some of those fixes. It doesn't have other things that we wanted. But that's the debate that we have in Congress, especially when you have a split House.
Do you like what your speaker negotiated here? That inclusion of the 702 and the money for Israel and Ukraine, to tying that all in this defense authorization bill?
I'm not sure if it was his idea or something he found that he had to agree to. I don't know the inner details, the inner workings of what they had to negotiate. It's not everything I want. It's just not. But I'm not part of that discussion. I know being the speaker is exceedingly challenging. I know that it doesn't matter who the speaker is. The House has to be in order, and then we have to move forward. Regardless, we're going to have some compromise. You know, I wish I could have been there to bash teeth with him, but I wasn't, and I don't know exactly how that went, so it's hard to judge.
Outline your military experience for our viewers.
Sure. So I spent 16 years in the Marine Corps, mostly as a helicopter pilot, did some airborne time, cross-deck with 10th Mountain, 101st with the Army, with the ROK Marines over in Korea. Spent a couple tours in the Persian Gulf, a couple tours in Africa, a couple tours in the Far East, and then I got out, went to medical school, came back in as an ER doctor, stationed at Camp Lejeune at Marine Corps Base again, did my last tour in Afghanistan in 2016 as the head of emergency medicine, and then retired in 2017.
20 years in the U.S. Marine Corps and the Navy, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you like about the defense authorization bill for our military men and women?
Well, first of all, it does continue to fund the military, so we don't have any sort of gap in pay. It does have some meager accommodations for pay increases for the military, although it's 5%. We probably need it closer to 30% for the junior enlisted for adjusted cost of living. It does have some consequential behavioral changes as far as what we allow in the military, as far as DEI and the way we approach the military. It does put limits on what agencies are able to advise the military on where they can spend their money. There are people like NewsGuard and stuff like that were basically biased against conservative news agencies, saying they were lying and that it shouldn't be advertised on, which takes away advertising dollars from recruiting people into the military from conservative venues. And I think that was, first of all, bad advertising. I got my MBA. I know marketing, and if you're going to advertise for people coming to the military, your conservative venues are the best venues to advertise on. And it was creating a bias. We were paying for that bias. Now that can't be done willy-nilly. So that's one of the other good things that's going on, too.
Let's get to calls. Anna in Texas, Democratic caller. You're up first for the congressman.
Yes, good morning for you, Greta, and the representative. I'm 75 years old, and we have more military bases in Texas than anyone that can take care of the border. I worked on the border for 8 years with the military, and so, but I want to say one thing about the border. Since 1836, they've been crossing the border. And like I say, I'm 75 years of age. My people, black people, did not get in Texas part of the Emancipation Proclamation. And that's why we have Juneteenth, 1865. That's when we were released. What bothers me about Congressman McCormick and a lot of congressmen and the people like Chip Roy, Jake Felsey, and Crenshaw, and they all know Texas right now, gasoline, $2.31. Our inflation a little higher, but when you're 75 years old and Ronald Reagan had interest rate at 20%, this is nothing. We had Social Security increase first time 8.3% last year, 3.2% this year. And I hear people from New Jersey and
Anna, can you get to your question?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. I want to get to the question. Why are y'all spending so much money on the border when the border has been we have spent trillions of dollars on the border? And also, since you were in the military...
Okay, Anna, I got to leave it there so that the congressman can respond. We've got other calls waiting.
Okay, so when you talk about the border, first of all, trillions of dollars, I think is I'm not sure where your numbers are coming from. I will tell you, my dad taught at FLETC. He was a border guy. And you want to talk about minorities and stuff, but it's funny that you call me out. I was actually student body president at Morehouse School of Medicine, which is a traditionally black school. That's as a white male conservative in a school that's 60% female, 80% black, and 95% liberal. I understand there's all kinds of racial things in what you just said. But let's talk about the numbers. If you want to talk about the cost to America, if you want to talk about the record number of crossings right now, if you want to talk about the drug trafficking, which is killing a record number of people in America, when you're talking about an invasion basically of 9.6 million people this presidency, which would be the equivalent of 13 congressional seats if you did the numbers. If you talk about the overwhelming burden on just not the healthcare system, but the welfare system, the education system, the sheltering, even the sanctuary cities right now don't want this. Democrats don't want this. This is a very unpopular thing to have a porous border to a sovereign nation where we cannot control who comes here, especially when you have so many terrorists around the world trying to get here. And we've had about 1.7 million people, we don't even know who they are, that got away, that could be right here to harm you, to harm your family. That's not good policy. And we have record numbers. We've never seen it before. And it's gotten worse every single month. We're setting records. That's not good for America.
According to the Wall Street Journal and New York Times, there is a possible deal between the White House and Republicans on Ukraine aid and changes to immigration policy. Here's the Wall Street Journal. White House offer moves border deal within reach. And it says the White House offer, backed by Democratic negotiators, includes creating a new expulsion power at the border that would allow the government to turn away asylum seekers without letting them claim asylum, akin to the pandemic-era Title 42 policy employed by the Trump administration. Democrats have proposed allowing the new expulsion authority to be used only if certain thresholds are hit, such as daily illegal border crossings. Democrats also have offered to create a requirement that some asylum seekers be held in immigration detention for the duration of their hearings, a Republican demand, though it wasn't known whether the new requirement would apply to the migrant families or only single adults. The proposal would also raise the initial threshold asylum seekers must meet in a screening interview and expand that government's rapid deportation authority to be used nationwide rather than just at the border. Is that enough to secure your vote?
That's a tough one. So I think that when you talk about asylum has been abused. Everybody who comes to America is looking for a better life. I get that. I think anybody who's ever come to America is looking for a better life. That's not asylum. You can make a case that you're trying to escape something. I get that, but it's been abused. The Remain in Mexico policy, I think, is the best policy we should have. I don't think we're done negotiating on this. I think they're going to be whipping the votes. I would like to say until you have a Remain in Mexico 2, you get the H.R. 2 that we passed already through the House, then it's a no-go for me.
You want your line is H.R. 2.
H.R. 2 is what we voted on. We passed that through the House.
But with only Republican votes.
That's right. That's the control of the House. That's what we do. We pass things because we have control of the House. And it's popular with Americans. This isn't something that we just pass because we're just forcing it through. America wants to secure our border. America wants a safer America.
You'd have to get through the Senate and then on the president's desk, though.
So the Senate wants something, too. That's why this is combined. Because why else would you combine Ukraine with the southern border? That's where the compromise is. It's not like you get what you want and then we get part of what we want. That's not negotiation. That's not compromise.
Let's go to Richard, who's in Savannah, Georgia, your home state, Republican. Hi, Richard.
Good morning, and thank you for taking my call. I'd like to see the Fairness Doctrine Act come back into place. I firmly believe the media is part of the destruction right now of America. I would love to see that if you could possibly put that back in place. As far as the border goes, President Biden's first rule, I guess, would be to protect Americans, which he's not doing. So there's so many things. But as far as the impeachment inquiry, I think it's needed. Think of what they did to Trump and his kids and what they put him through for the last 7 years. But anyway, I appreciate you being from Georgia. And if you could get the Fairness Doctrine Act, I would love to have fairness in our media, which I believe is destroying America. Thank you very much, Greta, and have a good day.
All right.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think fairness in media is something we aspire to. I think we all have our own responsibility. I think it's going to be hard to address because it's subjective for a lot of people. But we have a lot of discussion. I think Ted Cruz has addressed this multiple times, especially on social media. The bias that's built in. We had college professors talk about a 2% slant in voting behavior because of the bias in the media. So it actually affects the outcomes of votes, and you can see how close votes have been over the years. So I think that's an important thing, and thanks for your support on the border and for the impeachment.
Nikki in Rockaway Park, New York, Independent.
Well, good morning, Mr. McCormick. You are familiar with the Constitution and why impeachment is used, right? Because Office of Legal Counsel has reiterated that you cannot indict a sitting president. So the only means of removal that our founding fathers were fortunate enough to see that we might have corrupt officials. Now, you cannot be impeached. Senators cannot be impeached. You must be removed either by, like George Santos was, correct? Okay. So, but now we have an impeachment clause. Impeachment is reserved from crimes committed while holding that office. Impeach Donald Trump for all the stuff he did before he took office. So is it not true that impeachment is very sacred and reserved for crimes committed during the presidency?
Okay.
Show me one piece of evidence. You have all this evidence where since January 20th, when President took the office of president, that Joe Biden has taken any bribes, received any money from his son. And
Okay,
then
Nikki, let's take that point.
Okay. So first of all, we voted on a inquiry. That's finding the truth. I think anybody who doesn't want to find the truth is just not having an honest conversation to begin with. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, if we have an inquiry, it's to expose what money has been transferred, and that's been ongoing. I think the fact that we're avoiding something that literally would compromise who you are as the President of the United States, that you received money from a foreign entity, passed through your family, from not one foreign entity, but 5 foreign entities, multiple times, compromise you as a president right now. And that's the inquiry we're having.
Bruce, Kingston, New York, Democratic caller.
Yeah, good morning, sir. And I have to start off, obviously, with thanking you for a very impressive lifetime of service to the country. And I respect your position and everything you've done, in support of the free world. I want to go into what you started out the session about. And in the first place, I want to make 2 points. One is that if the standards of suspicion against Biden is so compelling that you have to begin an inquiry with no true proof and no actual direct, as a matter of fact, in regular court you'd be accused of a false accusation for trying to make these kind of claims. But this is political, of course. But if those standards are so strong that suspicion alone can begin an impeachment inquiry, then why aren't those same standards held to Trump when it's not suspected? It's been demonstrated how he abused power, how he abused finances, how his son-in-law, who was in office, as opposed to a private citizen who's being prosecuted and persecuted, in my opinion, at this time. I'll leave that as it is. But the main thing I want to say is we know factually that President Trump went to the Ukraine and told Zelensky, it doesn't matter if you actually have proof, just say there's an investigation. Now it appears that Trump has gone to his crony insurrectionists in Congress, like Jim Jordan, and told them basically, just say there's an investigation. And that's what it appears to, according to the facts.
Okay, Bruce, I'll have the congressman respond to you.
So what's interesting, and I see these partisan talking points all the time, and the thing that's frustrating to me is almost like there's 2 conversations happening, one about Trump and one about Biden. Let's devoid ourselves of the Trump thing for a second, because that's not really what this is about. This is about an impeachment process or an inquiry for Joe Biden. It's funny. People just talked about something that Trump did in Ukraine, but they don't talk about what Joe Biden bragged about on TV in front of a whole bunch of people, saying, I got them to drop a case. I got that lawyer to stop investigating my son, or you don't get $1 billion. He literally said that. And nobody wants to talk about that from the Democratic side. They're like, well, Joe, there's no evidence. You talk about what Trump did, but you ignore what Biden literally admitted to on TV in front of an audience, talking about literally leveraging his position as vice president of the United States to get a lawyer to back off his son investigated in order to get quid pro quo money, which he said on TV, and everybody wants to ignore that as if that's not something that happened.
The Washington Post this morning on that claim says that former U.S. officials, Ukrainian anti-corrupt activists, and even some Republicans have rebutted that allegation.
I'm just telling you what I heard. I heard him say it. I've watched the clip. Maybe I'm misunderstanding the clip, but it seemed like he was bragging about getting somebody fired who was looking into his son, because if they kept on looking into his son, he was not going to allow them to have $1 billion. I've watched the clip at least a dozen times. I'm sure you have too. How would you interpret that differently than I'm interpreting that, what Joe Biden said on that clip? I'm just curious. Anybody want to answer that? I'm happy to listen to what their explanation of what else could he be saying? I don't get it.
Bob in Atlanta, Republican.
Hey, I'm calling this morning because you look like the Virginians I used to know. I'm from Norfolk originally, and you look like somebody that I expect to be from Virginia, not like that awful
But he's from
Warner.
Georgia.
Now,
He's from Georgia.
Biden to be brought up for treason charges, because when I served in 71 in the Army, I had to take an oath to defend this country against all enemies, domestic and abroad, and I'm sure he maybe had to take something like that when he became president. I'd like to know why he's not defending the southern border over something that's no less than an invasion, and will damage this country irreparably in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the debate we're having right now. I think the public opinion is put him way underwater. The southern border is one of his biggest problems. It's one of the Democrats' biggest problems, in my opinion. They know that every city right now is burdened with this. This isn't just one state, one place. It's not remote. It has literally been a burden to our entire country. Even the Democrats understand this is a problem. When you have Democrats come across and say, man, I hope we pass this, but they can't say that openly. It's because of the immense pressures inside that political machine. But absolutely, it's costing us. It's costing us lives. It's costing us crime. It's costing us drug crossing. It's costing. We know that terrorists are coming across. We've had a record number caught, and we have 1.7 million people that have not been caught. And of that, there's got to be a percentage of that has to be people who would do us harm. It is absolutely the wrong thing to do. It has encouraged the wrong behavior. We're seeing in record numbers every single month. It's increasing. I rest my case.
Wall Street Journal editorial board this morning. Will America betray Ukraine? Biden and Republicans would co-own a Vietnam-scale debacle. They write, negotiators were still talking by our deadline, and the optimistic case is that even if a deal doesn't emerge this week, Congress can pass something quickly in January before Ukraine's weapons needs are acute. But the slower the weapon delivery, the longer the fighting lasts, and the less likely that Ukraine will be able to seize the initiative on the battlefield. And it says, Ukraine's critics want Kiev to negotiate with Russia, but why would Mr. Putin settle now if he thinks he might win outright? An overrun Ukraine would be a second Afghanistan for President Biden. The strategic damage, Mr. Putin victorious and emboldened China, would be much worse than the debacle in Kabul. Republicans don't want to co-own that world, and they will if they abandon Ukraine after its people have sacrificed so many lives for 2 years.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought this up. I'm actually very much in support of Ukraine. I just got back from a conference at the Reagan Library where we had several secretaries of defense. We had secretaries of state. We had an amazing array of both Democrats and Republicans, but every Republican, and I'm talking to Republicans right now, I think this is a really important conversation to have. Every single former Secretary of Defense I've talked to, all the way back to Reagan, is very much in support of Ukraine. The strategic outcome of Ukraine will not only impact all of Europe, but also the Far East. China is paying attention to what's happening there. They're looking at what they want to do in Taiwan, which would be catastrophic to our chip industry, by the way, because they produce 100% of our AI chips. It's a strategic corridor where I think 70% of the world's wealth goes through every single day. It is of strategic essence to keep Ukraine. First of all, we made a promise, both in the Budapest Accords and NATO's unanimous vote to support a country that was invaded by a communist country, an autocracy. This is a battle between democracy and autocracy. This is a battle of the 70% of the Ukraine that Ukraine owns of the grain storage, an immense amount of steel, titanium, other valuable resources that would make Russia stronger, that would be able to support China, that would do everything to break up the United States global leadership. This is a very important battle we need to have. And I don't think, yes, we have to have accountability. That's why we have an IG written into the NDA. Yes, we have to make sure that we're going to win. But slow rolling this, I agree with the article. We've never won anything, not in Afghanistan, not in Iran, not in Vietnam. If you look at history, I used to teach this stuff, evolutionary warfare, amphibious warfare. I used to teach it. And I'll tell you, slow rolling does not help you win, especially when you're basically Ukraine fighting one of the largest armies in the world. They're investing 20% of their GDP, and I'm talking about Russia, into rebuilding their army, which was decimated by our weaponry, where we took out 50% of their armor, 300,000 casualties. We're doing well, but if we're going to regain territory, if we're going to win this war, we cannot continue to slow roll. And Europe and the United States has to do their part to end this quickly because they want to outlast us. They know that the longer a war goes on, the more unpopular it gets, the less support you have. But every single person who has strategic experience in history that I know of is all for winning this and making sure we do right.
Congressman, I have to ask you before you go about this back and forth with your colleague, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Claims you got physically aggressive with her. Can you explain what happened?
Yeah, so I actually went up to, I had a disappointing conversation with somebody else that disappointed me. I came up to her, I literally placed my hands on her shoulder and said, at least you and I can have an honest conversation. That's all I said. You know, it's funny, I on a daily basis, I'm an ER doc. I believe in the power of touch. I give people hugs. I shake people's hands. If you look at the floor on any given day, just look at C-SPAN. Look at the floor and see how much touching there is. Everybody touches everybody. Never, you know, I'm not going to touch her again, that's for sure. But I'm sorry she took offense to that, but it certainly wasn't meant aggressively. It was meant actually as a compliment. That's what's so frustrating about this. I'm not sure. I've seen the story evolve. It's you know, it was on the floor in front of people. I consider myself a very friendly, gregarious person. I want to get along with my colleagues. Obviously, I don't call people names on the floor. I don't go around insulting people. Other people do that. I don't. I think that's beyond my reputation. I don't think that's anything I would ever do on the floor. I play rugby. I'm a Marine. I'm an aggressive guy in certain circumstances, but certainly not on the floor of the House of Representatives where I want to get along with people. If you look at my rhetoric, if you look at what we've passed, when I did the censorship on Rashida Tlaib, 22 Democrats voted for that. Why? Because I have good relationships and because I can talk to people and we can actually solve things. I'm not there to make enemies. I'm there to make friends.
On a lighter note, you and some of your colleagues are planning a skateboard race. Tell us real quick if you can.
So myself, Morgan Luttrell, Navy SEAL, Tim Burchett, who makes skateboards, actually agreed to a race. We were supposed to do it last night. Our announcer got sick. Unfortunately, he was the filmer and the announcer. 3 laps around Longworth. It would have been great with the Christmas ornaments there as obstacles. It's friendly. It's fun. Sometimes you got to be a knucklehead. That's the thing I miss about the Marine Corps is that sort of camaraderie. Looking forward to rescheduling that.
All right. And your skateboarding history goes is part of who you are, and it's still part of who you are every day. We've got a shot of your shoes, right? These are skateboarding shoes?
So, yeah, I wear comfortable shoes. My Vans and other shoes are basically made for comfort and speed. Sometimes it's easier to get around on a skateboard, and it's a good stress relief, too.
Well, we'll be looking to that race. It'll be on social media, I suspect, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Well, thank you for the conversation this morning. We appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. God bless Semper Fi.